Hi, I'm Ellen Lambert-Grayo, Creative Director for Live Design and LDI, and I'd like to welcome you to Plot Lines, an exciting new series where lighting designers share and discuss a light plot in great depth. These wonderful sessions are hosted by lighting and projection designer Roma Flowers. Today's special guest is Tony Award-winning lighting designer Jeff Kreuter, who will share and discuss the plots for his award-winning work on Peter and the Starcatcher. His additional Broadway credits include Freestyle Love Supreme, Bandstand, Falsettos the Revival, Something Rotten, Newsies, Holiday Inn, The Pee Wee Herman Show, and Penn and Teller, both on Broadway and in Las Vegas. He also works extensively in regional theater, dance, special events, concerts, circus, and off-Broadway, where he has designed over 200 shows. The light plot for Peter and the Starcatcher is perfect for plot lines, as it underwent many changes and adaptations through numerous incarnations over the long life of the show, on its wonderful journey from a workshop at La Jolla Playhouse to off-Broadway, to a first national tour and a second national tour. Our host, COY award-winning lighting and visual designer Roma Flowers, is a faculty member of Texas Christian University's School for Classical and Contemporary Dance, where she teaches courses in dance production, lighting design for dance, and the camera in dance. I'm so pleased that you're both here with us today. So plot lines, let's turn it over to Jeff and Roma.
Hello.
Hi,
Hi,
Jeff.
Jeff. I just love to say hello and tell you what an honor and a pleasure it is to meet you. And it's certainly been really, really insightful speaking with you these last couple of days. I'm just really excited for you to share those nuts and bolts about Peter and the Starcatchers. So, Jeff, take it away.
Thank you so much, Roma, and thank you, Ellen, and thank you both for having me. It has been exciting to revisit this show. It was special to me for so many reasons, and will always have such a huge place in my heart. So I really hadn't thought about it like this in some time. So it's been nice to get back into it. So thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this with Peter and the Starcatcher. I will say, when you first approached me, there were a few options that we talked about, and this one stood out partially because so much time has passed, and partially for all of the reasons that Ellen said in her introduction. There are many light plots that were my involvement with Peter and the Starcatcher, and while they were all slightly different, they all had the same goal. Every time we did it, the show actually wanted to look exactly the same, but we went through different incarnations and different equipment to get there. So we'll talk about a little bit of that, and we'll spend most of our time looking at the Broadway show, the Broadway light plot, and sort of taking that apart, or really putting it together. I'm going to start with an empty empty screen, and fill it with lights, and you can sort of see what the process was. Okay, so this is an opportunity, as I just sort of mentioned, it's like a little journey through time, and my involvement with Peter and the Starcatcher started with the first workshop. Over the next several years, there were 6 different light plots, some more different than others. But why don't we start, I think, with like a little description of what the show is. Well, or maybe I'll play a video first. Actually, well, first I'm going to say, I've already said this to Roma. Roma, please interrupt me if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, anything that as I go, I will not be hurt if you stop me and say anything.
Okay.
So Peter and the Starcatcher is it's a play with music. It's sort of a musical. In fact, when we first did it out of town, there were more songs in it, and they ended up taking them out. But it's a very musical play, and to me it's more musical than it is play. It's adapted from the novel Peter and the Starcatchers by Dave Barry and Ridley Pearson. Adapted for the stage by Rick Ellis, with music by Wayne Barker, directed by Roger Rees and Alex Timbers, 2 directors. It tells the pre-Peter Pan story, how Peter became Peter and how he ended up in Neverland. The first act is a journey, is the journey to where he ends up, and the second act takes place on what will eventually become Neverland. Stylistically or conceptually, the approach was sort of based on how the RSC presented Nicholas Nickleby, years earlier that Roger Rees actually starred in. So he was sort of the perfect person to shepherd this, along with Alex, who was one of the most inspirational people I've worked with in the theater biz. It is I would say, a highly theatrical show, or can be. I mean, it can sort of be whatever you want, but I feel like it's highly theatrical, strong imagery, mostly abstract. It is a theater of the imagination. And my job, along with the people I was working with, was to figure out how lighting played a part in that imagination. So I'm going to play a little video of the Broadway company. Okay, here we go.
Of course, we dream other dreams. We change. We grow up. It always happens. Nothing is forever. That's the rule.
Everything ends.
And so our story begins. Supposing all these planks and ropes are now the British Empire.
Okay, that's a little taste of what it is. I'm going to just show a couple of pictures now. And okay, so I was fortunate enough to start working on the show at the first workshop. So the first time it was ever put up with a cast, with a group of people in front of an audience. I was there, and we spent weeks at La Jolla Playhouse in their black box, looking at, talking, but when it comes to lighting, you can only talk so much. You sort of have to throw things at the stage. And what was great, so as you saw, and as we said, and as maybe they said, imagine that all these ropes are the British Empire, or a ship, or an island. That's what the charge was. So the set was pretty spare at first. It was a bunch of, it was actually the first time we did this was basically an empty stage with a background. And the question was, when the performers make a shape with a rope on the floor, like a hatch that someone may or may not jump into, or a doorway, or a hallway, if 10 actors stood in a line to create a wall and the other actors were crawling down what is a hallway next to that wall, how much does lighting support that? And that's part of what I was there to figure out for myself, and to prove to everyone else whether it was a good idea or a bad idea. The answer was it was a good idea. So this is sort of the basic, and this is one of our a representation of an open space. But when we get to spaces like this is the hallway. We really supported everything we could with light. Here, let me, I'll even make this bigger because I can do that. There we go. These things, these pictures here, this was at La Jolla in workshop with 2 overhead moving lights. These are cues that were in the Broadway production. Like this box on the floor is exactly where it was, in exactly that color at the Brooks Atkinson Theater on Broadway. This hallway was the same, maybe instead of 1 light, it was 4 lights making this hallway, so it was brighter, but it was the hallway. That's a bunch of people on a boat, and that's what we did. Even this, was, I think at La Jolla was, 1 light with a gobo and like a tiny bit of backlight on everyone else. This is a cue, like you could have, if you looked at the Broadway production and look back at this, you probably would not be able to tell the difference. That's what before we get to that one. That's what was pretty great about being there with them, figuring this out. So the answer was yes, the lighting would support everything. If a performer was jumping through a hatch in the floor that was made by rope, the light would support that. We would have a box of light on the floor, and when someone jumped into that box of light on the floor, it would disappear and they would be someplace else. Act 2, they're on the island at this point. So Act 1 is very sort of claustrophobic and dark, and there's a lot of water imagery, and it takes place during there's a storm that causes the shipwreck that makes them land on the island. But Act 1 is claustrophobic, dark, sort of spare, not very colorful, although I know blue is a color. So blue and white, which are their colors, but it was a very tight palette. Act 2, and this is La Jolla, it became this changed the most for the next incarnations, but it is more colorful, more cartoonish, and a little lighter, and more fun. So this is the La Jolla, it really was a workshop, and there wasn't a lot of scenery. This is the model now for our first production in New York Theater Workshop. This is Danielle Worley did the set design for this, and this is Paloma Young did the costumes, and Darren West did the sound design. So this is the model for what was the off-Broadway production, and this is what moved on with the show from here forward. So every production of the show that we did, the Broadway production, well, I will say, so off-Broadway, Broadway, off-Broadway again, except the next off-Broadway was a commercial production, for profit, then first national tour, second national tour. All this production, this set, same light plot, same concepts of light plot, different equipment. So you'll see there's the lights, play a major part into the set. Part of that is to point up the theatricality, also to create a ceiling to make it really feel claustrophobic. The lights are very much in the world. This is a little Act 2 opening number, a little palette cleanser. Everyone swam through magical dust and became mermaids. Not to give it away for people who haven't seen the show. And then this is Act 2. So everything opens up. The lights fly out. All of the ropes and all that other stuff that was there go away, and is replaced by these plastic drops, one upstage and one stage left, one stage right. And that is our surround. And the whole thing acts as it's a cyc, but it's a light box. The entire surround becomes a light box. And it was, pretty neat. And I know this is a model, but it kind of looked like that. It was these like giant plastic drops that were made, I think, I think, Roma, you may have asked me this question, or Ellen yesterday, what, like Danielle is sort of famous for using found objects to create scenery. I don't know what this actually was, but I know that it wasn't set out. It wasn't, the original purpose of whatever this stuff was not scenery, but I don't know what it was to start with. Left and right, you'll see, can you see my pointer? I don't know.
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah, so these are bands. So there were musicians that played the music that accompanied the performers, and they were singing. Yes, it is a play with music, but it's a musical because they sang a lot. They also did all the Foley and all the underscoring, and kind of made the, and this, so here's the model. This is the set. This is a picture of the set in the Broadway theater, with the giant pineapple in the middle. It's my favorite thing. And here's, so here's some of the Broadway pictures, or I say Broadway, these are not all Broadway. So some of these are tour, some are off Broadway. Here are the pictures of the company. So again, this is Act 1, fairly, tight palette, until things get a little crazy. Blue is a color, but still blue, white, and incandescent. But again, light creating space. It wasn't just that people were holding a rope to define their space. The light also defined it. This one, so a couple of interesting things about this. So that the horizontal rope here represents the water line. And so everything in the space had what we use gobo rotators, and made an entire, made everything look like it was rippled water. And what's interesting about this picture actually is that I can see that the light is focusing correctly. So there's supposed to be only light on the guy being held up. But the fact that there's light on him is kind of actually a mistake. A momentary photo at the wrong time. But so he was now, so they were lifting him up, so he was above the water line. They threw him overboard, so this rope actually rises up, and so everyone else is blue and ripply and underwater, and he is in a shaft of light across, above everyone's head that he floats in. It's just white. This sort of thing, this the way he sees it, she's levitating, but the way the audience sees it is, there's no magic. She wasn't levitated by wires. We just, somebody stood on a ladder behind her to make it look like she was floating. Again, it's like the imaginative theater of the imagination. This is the first time anything touches the star stuff, the thing that turns everyone to mermaids in Act 2, and the thing what makes Peter Pan. A cat gets into the star stuff and starts flying around, and it's just a flat thing with a light through it and someone doing a little puppet show. This particular picture is one of my favorite parts of the show, not because, it's actually one of the saddest moments of the show, but again, we did this now, I think 6 times, maybe we lit this particular scene 7 times. Roger Rees, who sadly no longer with us, and one of the directors, as I mentioned before, every time we put this cue up to tech this, it was never bleak enough. It was one of those things, like we'd put it up and he'd say, can it be colder? Can it be sadder? Because it was the saddest part of the show. And, so that's the bleakest that it got. Again, so you saw something similar to this in the picture from the workshop. This is the Broadway production. Now, there's a whole bunch more stuff in the way, so we'll get to that in a second too. Same thing. This is, same idea, except with smoke. And there's the actual mermaid drop. So this is now Act 2 this is the actual plastics, not a model version. This is the kids at the top of a mountain, about to take a step down into the woods. They start Act 2 at the top of a hill and decide that they're going to venture down to find out where they are. And they take a step, and all of a sudden they're in the woods. They're in the forest going down the side of a mountain. And they encounter people hiding behind things. This is one of those scenes where encounter other inhabitants of the island and her. And this is when they're captured, and you can see that it is, they're on a tropical island. It is, there's color, there's real color now.
Yeah.
This is a scene again in the woods and in the canopy. She's climbing through the trees, and the trees are, the canopy of the trees are umbrellas. I don't know why I wanted to call it an elevator. Umbrellas. And yeah, and that's and there we are. Okay, so let's talk about light plots. That's why we're here. It's called plot lines, not picture lines. Any questions? Anything we should talk about so far? Or?
Yeah, Jeff, a question just came in from Charles Cooper. His question is, I thought I read somewhere that the plastic drops had started out life as part of Little Mermaid scenery.
Oh my God.
That had recently closed.
I actually don't know that that's true, but sure. I don't, maybe. If that is true, that's great. So funny. I actually thought it was more garbage, but maybe not. Maybe it was Little Mermaid garbage. That's so interesting.
Okay.
That's great. That's so very possible.
And they were translucent, were they not? All the drops were.
Yes, very, very important point. They were translucent. And in fact, they didn't light so well from the front. They were, we lit them all a little bit from the front, but they lit from the back way better than they lit from the front. And in certain seats, because of side light, we had a lot of side light, and the light hit those drops. Certain places you sat in the house, it was not great, I have to say. But most for
Is
like,
that just about controlling the glare on the plastic itself?
that's it, yeah, glare. And it really was, I don't mean like 3 seats on each side. If you sat at a certain point and looked at the plastic, there would be a little bit of glare. And there was really nothing to do about that, unfortunately. But I also don't think that anyone sitting in those seats cared or noticed. That was just me who cared and noticed. No one else. I don't think anyone else did, because I wanted to be perfect for everyone.
Here's
Um,
another question we have
yes,
here for you,
please.
Jeff.
Yeah.
Were there any looks from the La Jolla workshop performance that didn't make it to Broadway that you miss? Any scenes there?
You know what? No, I mean, you know what? That's funny that I missed. No, I don't think so. It's a great question. I mean, I had some things that I did in Act 2 that I liked, but they did not make it to Broadway because Act 2 is so completely visually different from La Jolla to the next steps. So I thought there were some like beautiful things that we were able to do there. And like really pretty skies, unfortunately not the ones that I showed, but there was some good psych work. You know, I did some good. backdrop work
That was
there.
a good looking site.
Yeah, there was some good psych work. So none of that made it, but it was replaced by these like amazing plastics that no, I like there weren't clouds, but there were other things that were pretty cool. So that's a great question though. There always are. I mean, like there's always, you know, no matter what I do, there's always something that I wish made it. Nothing ever makes it to everyone. Yeah.
Here's a question also. I think it is, did you use LED tapes to make the ship outline? I actually think that was just rope, was it not?
It was rope.
That out, yeah, just plain rope.
Yeah.
Just, yeah.
While this is now, I know it doesn't seem that long ago, and in the grand scheme of life, the universe and everything, it wasn't that long ago. But LED tape wasn't something that you just sort of like, you know, used all over the place. People were using it, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't like something that an actor could very easily carry around and create an outline of a ship. No, that was rope, like, and that's what created all of the outlines of everything were rope. I don't want to say that people weren't using LED tape back then. They definitely were, but not the way they're using it now. And it wasn't something that I would have thought to do. Perhaps now people are.
Let's keep going, Jeff.
Yeah. Great. Sorry. Let's keep going. It's just
Yeah.
musing about LED tape. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen again. Share. Okay. So let's, how does this work? Here we go. Okay, so this is the La Jolla workshop light plot. 2 moving lights over stage. 1, 2. They are VL 1000 arc, and then we have a couple of studio spots, like good old studio spots over here on the sides, because that's what the theater had, and then 2 auto yokes, and that was our, you know, moving light complement. The studio spots didn't do very much, to be honest. They were pretty old. The audio yokes did a ton, and the VL 1000s over stage probably didn't turn off very much. They were probably on the whole time. Basic systems here: backlight, side light, you know, scroller backlight, but this, you know, a ton of side light. That's the thing. The workshop, to answer the question before about what I'm like, the biggest things that I missed between the La Jolla and then everything beyond that was just the amount, because there was no scenery really, there was so much side light. And I love, you know, I have a dance background. Side light is where I live. It's where I first go for everything. And we went from having like piles of it to having a very small amount of it. But so what we had, we really had to make count, and we'll get there in a moment. So here, I'm just going to fly through the light plots before we dive into anything else. So here we go: La Jolla, New York Theater Workshop, obviously very different. We'll come back to this. Broadway, New World Stages. So this is the commercial off Broadway. First national tour, more moving lights. Second national tour, even more moving lights. Okay, So La Jolla, here's the equipment list for La Jolla.
Okay.
Now, this is going to be saved on somewhere so people can come back and look at the equipment list is all they want. And so Roma, you tell me, yeah, I guess, should we spend time? Do you want to?
I'm just quickly kind of going through, really dividing up your amount of conventionals.
It was, yeah, it's a
Yeah,
conventional
okay.
show.
Yeah, very
And
much so. Okay.
And scrollers, like conventional lights, color scrollers, and gobo rotators. I think there were 10 or so on the show in that version. And that, the water was a pretty important part of the look. Here is the magic sheet for that version. Again, like this magic sheet, I'll show you the magic sheets for every version. They don't change so much. I mean, this is pretty much what it was. Like these systems remained for the most part. Okay. Oh yeah, moving light magic sheet. Here is, yeah, just another shot of the version of the light plot, a close up. Okay, New York Theater Workshop. This is where things changed. There was a design. There was a different set design, and this is what the show actually became. This is the ground plan of the set. This is what I was handed, well, not really. I mean, we had a lot of meetings before this. I think I saw the model first, but at a certain point I was handed this, and this is a good old fashioned hand drafting. You don't see this too much anymore either. This is a scanned hand drawing. And here's the section of that. So what you see in this drawing is you actually see a composite here. You see both the surround of the plastics drawn here. That's what this is. And then you see the Act 1 structures, stage left and stage right, and sort of see it here. And this sort of window wall that cuts through the space on a diagonal, and the grid. So it's like a little teeny tiny box set with holes in it for light. So as I said, like side lights, like super important to me, and it was very important, and not just to me, but for the show. So how do we get side light into this space? Well, we'll see about that in a moment. So here's our grid. So as drawn, she drew, Danielle drew this grid that would, that would want to fly out. So this point would stay where it is, and this point back here would fly up so that it was flat up here. I will show you in a moment what we ended up actually doing. Here's that magic sheet for New York Theater Workshop. And again, any people can come back to this and stare as long as they like, if they want to. Okay, moving light magic sheet. And here's our equipment list for New York Theater Workshop. Still pretty conventional. I mean, it's still a while ago now where moving lights hadn't really taken over the way they've taken over now. I'm sure this had been very different had we been doing this now. It would have been different, but it would have been harder because moving lights are big and we didn't have any space. So we'll look at that in a second. Okay, here's the section from New York Theater Workshop. With a bunch of, this is sort of how I kind of work in section, just figuring out angles and coverage and throws and all those fun things. Yeah, it was pretty, as you can see, pretty low back there for the first act.
Yeah.
So here's a close-up. So what we actually ended up doing is, instead of having an entire grid that started at one point and pivoted up, we did it with individual pipes. The reason being is that because we could then have like backlight and some side light could be used at both trends. If the whole thing pivoted up, a light that was pointing straight down in the first act would be pointing upstage in the second act, or a light in the second act that was pointing like straight down in the first act would be in the audience's eyes. I don't know if that's, my little puppet hand gestures are making any sense, but It took me actually probably longer than I care to admit of staring at this to realize that we should make this individual and then add, sidearms basically upstage and downstage at angles to make it look like everything was on a pitch, even though it was not all connected as an individual. And that also let me bury. So the other thing is that we didn't want to see moving lights, like on the low grid. We wanted to obscure the moving lights because they were a little too technological for what this show was trying to do, and even Source 4's were. So we but that's, we didn't have much of a choice there. But we hung like big open face, not open face, but big Fresnel, like 2K Fresnels, because we liked the look of that, of the Fresnel lens. And that was an important background to what the show was up above. And you see, so the green pipes are the ones that moved, and the yellow pipes stayed in place, and they were at a higher trim. I guess I don't have a section of that here. I'll show you in the Broadway one. So that the green for Act 2 went up to meet the yellow, and that everything was flat at that point. But in Act 1, the yellow was high enough so that you didn't see giant moving lights hanging. You saw just the lens of the moving light without knowing actually what it was. Still fairly modest. I mean, like, we went from like 2 moving lights to 4 moving lights over stage, plus some washes up here. And they did a lot of work. They were on the entire show again, like all those specials, like so much of the show was lit by those lights. Okay, so here we are. Here's the Broadway equipment list for Starcatcher. Lots of strip lights and scenery lighting. So much of what you see on this list is lighting for the set, and really the moving lights and some backlight and side light Lecos was all that was on the people. And here's your Broadway magic sheet. Oh, okay. I should say, so my associate for La Jolla was Grant Yeager, and he worked with me at New York Theater Workshop as well. And Corey Paddock joined that team at New York Theater Workshop. When it came time to move to Broadway, it sort of happened so quickly. I was, in tech for a couple of shows. So Grant Yeager and I ended up co-designing a show at the Vineyard, and he was not involved with the Broadway theater and the Starcatcher, except for like one day he came in to focus some lights because he knew how some things were done and it had to be done quickly. And then Corey Paddock was working on Newsies. So I hired, so for the beginning of the Broadway process, we had a whole new team, and that was Joel Silver and Andy Fritsch. And Tim Rogers programmed it on Broadway. And so at a certain point, Joel had to leave, and Corey came over from Newsies and joined the Starcatcher team. And then Corey did the next several incarnations of Starcatcher at, off Broadway, first national tour. And then Jake DeGroot did the second national tour, like the adaptation, as my associate. Okay, wanted to make sure I mentioned those names, because they're very important people to the development of the show, and none of this would have worked without all of them. So here's the moving light magic sheet for Broadway. As you can see, we expanded from 2 to still modest in compared to a Broadway show right now. This is nothing. I mean, I think I just saw an equipment list for a show that had like 150 moving lights. So again, this is I feel like right before there was a big shift in how in what we were able to get for a play. Still mostly to Brian McGarity, our production electrician's dismay, a lot of VL 1000s, which at the time were at the end of, nearing the end of their lifespan. So overheads were 3 studio colors because I think they were in Disney's warehouse, and I was able to just get them, I think, for free because they were sitting around left over from some other show. So we grabbed them. These are all VL 1000s, ARC in the front, audio yoks for specials, 3 VL 1000 tungsten, and 2 Clay Packy 1200 profiles because I wanted shutterable arc lights in the front for certain specials. Okay. And this is the Broadway light plot. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so this is just a breakdown of more, more views of the Broadway light plot. This is a Broadway side light plot, Broadway deck plot. Here, I'll spend a couple of seconds on each of these so that if people want to go back, they can go back. So this is the Broadway overview of the whole thing, basically. I'll explain what all of this stuff is in a moment. This is the side light plate. And here is the deck equipment, of which there was a lot, especially for the drops. This is all built into the floor here. And here's the Broadway section. Again, you can see same approach of just flying these two electrics up to meet the rest of the grid and flying the first electric out slightly. All right, so let's go. Okay, before we go into the light plot, nitty gritty, any other questions? Oh, Roma, I think I can't hear you because I can't see you, but
Yeah, a couple of questions have come in. If I understand correctly, when you worked in the studio during rehearsals with the studio kit to try things, did you draw that studio plot without having seen any rehearsals first?
oh yeah,
And this is for La Jolla as you went into the workshop rehearsals.
I did. I drew that before seeing any rehearsals. There was no, yes. So I arrived not long after the cast. So when I did the light plot, well, I was going to say there wasn't much of a show, but what's funny is that every time, so my first meeting for the show was at the Disney offices in New York, and Roger Rees acted out like the first 20 minutes of the show, basically. Like he, because he's an actor, he's a performer, and as a director, every time somebody new joined the team, we would have a meeting, and inevitably, Roger would like perform the beginning of the show for us, like the part where everyone like is crawling through the ship. And that's what it was. I mean, like that didn't change. Like his like description and personal interpretation of what the whole like first 20 to 30 minutes of the show was the show. So while I hadn't seen any rehearsal, when I was doing the light plot, there was no rehearsal. I knew I had a great feel for what we were going to do because Roger and Alex too, it wasn't just Roger. Alex was also able to convey the spirit of it. So, and also the light plot at that point was just generic enough that I could show up and do anything with it. And then as we played around on stage in rehearsal for 3 weeks, I knew that there were things that could become specials, or, like I don't need side light up here, so I'm going to turn that into diagonal backlight or something like that. A lot of that.
Here, it's sort of a related question. In La Jolla, it looks like most of your conventional fixtures are 750 watts, but in New York, you're going down to 575. Was that a choice, or was that driven by inventory? And I'm going to add to that, as you got more inventory in moving lights and intelligent beams, did that make that difference? Or was it just what was there in La Jolla that you used? And then New York, you went to sort of what the standard New York rental package will include, probably 575s.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. The answer, I mean, basically, yeah. So at La Jolla, like we didn't rent anything except for 2 VL1000s. So their equipment, if, it's funny, I didn't remember that, but if it says 750 on there, that's what it was. I mean, that means that they own 7 lights that were 750 watt, or one of my assistants wrote the wrong thing in Lightright, but that would be strange. So, it was probably 750 because that's what it was. Also the trims, because it wasn't set, the trims were way higher at La Jolla. Still, like if they had 575s in house, we would have used 575s. But all that is to say,
Okay.
when we went to New York Theater Workshop, again, we didn't rent that entire package. It was New York, the conventional equipment was New York Theater Workshop's house equipment, and we supplemented it. So their house equipment was 575. And
Okay.
for Broadway,
And so your supplements were all of your intelligent lights. Your
and we
moving
probably
lights.
supplemented some conventional equipment also
Okay.
for that show. But moving forward from there, we kept it at 575 because to move from New York Theater Workshop to Broadway and then beyond, we just kept putting the disc in the next console. Now, the shift from New York Theater Workshop to Broadway was a little more complicated because we were moving from an Obsession 2 to an EOS. But still, we like imported the cues and the trims didn't change. Like the physical production of the show was identical. So the cues sort of worked. I mean, for the most part, well, in large part, maybe not for the most part, in large part, the way the conventionals were used worked. So we did not change from 575 to 750 at that point because,
Here's a question. What was the quality of the VLs that the VLs provided that made you insist on them? In other words, why did you want VLs, or was that just what, again, you had?
It's a really good question for a lot of reasons. First of all, insist is something. There wasn't so much insistence as like it was begging, right? At that point, like to get 2 moving lights for a workshop, it was like, please, I know we need something with flexibility that has shutters. So the reason VL 1000s is because, well, two big reasons. One, they were the least expensive that I could get because at that time, like, not a lot of people really wanted them anymore. I mean, I'm not going to say no one did because it's a very popular light, but it was definitely not the one thing that people went after. In an arc source, maybe in an incandescent source, yes, but for an arc, really kind of less so. So number one, so there was definitely like price was a huge factor in this, but also number two, which is really probably number one, there's no fan in a VL 1000. So it was an arc source that was silent, and I don't know of any other light back then that fits that bill. And if you guys think I'm wrong, comment away, because there's nothing that at least that was available through a rental shop. Like there was nothing that I could rent that was silent with an arc source and shutters and gobos. I mean, so that's really why it was the VL 1000.
Great question.
And the reason it remained was because it worked. It worked, and it was still quiet, and I couldn't hang VL 35. I mean, I love the VL 3500. I couldn't hang it because it was too noisy. Oh, also something that is actually, I discounted. I didn't think about this, but this is really important. Like the beam spread of that VL 1000 was like enormous. There was really nothing else that got that big on the floor. Like when that thing went into like the super zoom, it was huge. So you could take one light and put a gobo in it and have a diagonal, and that's all you. In some respects, that and a little bit of side light, and you have like something interesting. And I know that people like throughout the history of the VL 1000 like crap all over the way it mixes color, especially with a gobo, but I sort of love it. I like that like double image. I like that it's not one solid color. It's like using split gel from back in the old days. So, I have no problem with that. Anyway, great question. Is there anything else?
The next question, you might want to get more into it as we actually go more detail into the plots. It was, so were there different lights for different trims, or did the alternate focuses work for either trim? And that might be helpful to actually see that light plot, those light
Let's dive
plots
in.
there.
Let's start talking about that right now. I'm gonna let's see, before I share the next screen, let's see if I can I'm gonna skip to something. Let's see if I can find something here. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, here we go. Share screen. Oh no, that's not what I want to do at all. Stop share. Technical difficulties, not really. I know what I'm doing mostly. Okay, so you see an empty theater,
Yeah,
right? Like a big empty space.
yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, here we go. So it should be filling the screen, but it's not. So I'm just gonna go on. Okay. So here's an empty space. Actually, no, I want this to get bigger. I don't know why it's not. It's strange. That's why. Nothing to see here. Everything to see here. Any other questions? No, here we go. There we go.
Yeah.
This is the Brooks Atkinson Theater. Similar to the New York Theater Workshop, similar to any place the show goes, similar to any place most shows go that I get to do. This is what we have when we start. We have a big empty space that with no lighting positions. I think the Brooks, maybe there were some positions, but I think, I don't know, I think it was a hemp house. I'm actually not sure. There may have been some line sets, but it didn't matter. We couldn't use any of them for what we were doing. So everything that we use in this space, with the exception of the box booms that were here, had to be brought in by us. This is the Act 1 scenery. You can see this, this rope wall over here with extended ropes on the sides. There's a little backdrop up there that remained for Act 2. So the backdrop for Act 1 is the same as Act 2. And these transoms that, enclose the space. So the playing space, especially when it comes to a Broadway show, it's like tiny. Here's the other transom. And here's Act 2. So all that goes away magically. And this flies in. This plastic comes in, that plastic comes in, and the rest of this is all there and it's just revealed. And this is a border that flies in at a certain point in Act 2. It's not there the whole time. And this is the mermaid drop. Okay, so this is a shot here of lighting positions. So I took the set design and the lighting positions at New York Theater Workshop, since that's a fixed grid. It was a very different approach than this, where everything had to be rigged, and in some ways liberating, because we could do anything we wanted. The only thing stopping us was space, and lack of space. So here is our, this is the position that is above the side plastic that did a lot of side light. This is a position that actually lights the plastic, like backlights the plastics on the sides. And here are I think we had, in this case, 3 positions that changed trim. Is that true? Yeah, I think so. And there was a whole, again, everything was on motors. So at intermission, it was our electrician and the whole team out there with distos, returning everything. Because it was on motors. It was also, I think, purposely pitched sideways. So it wasn't just raked upstage, downstage. It was also raked left and right, compound rake. Okay, so let's go to the light plot. Let's go to the Vectorworks, or as I like to call it, Vector Pig. Sorry, is anyone from Vectorworks watching? That was not nice of me to say. I apologize. I like Vectorworks fine. It's just so slow sometimes. Can you see that now, Roma? Oh, say again.
We're just starting to say Jeff has started sharing his screen, and now we see it. Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so this is the actual Vectorworks of the Broadway light plot. So I'm just going to go through and start filling things in and explain my approach to how everything. Finally, we're a half hour in, but we're getting to the actual light plot of plot lines, or more than a half hour in. Okay, so so we have side light. So I oftentimes I start with side light, because I can learn kind of the space by figuring out angles through the space. I will show. I'm going to show you one thing here. I can move this out of the way. I can. Okay, so I'm going to go to the section.
Jeff, it looks like your screen is lagging behind you a little bit.
Okay.
So right now we are seeing, it looks like your side lights there. So just know there's a little bit of time
Okay.
from when you're making something active that we can actually see it.
Got it. Can you see a section right now?
No.
Okay. Well, the section will pop up maybe soon.
There it is.
Okay. Can you see my pointer moving?
Yes.
Okay. So as you can see here, this is, you can see the different trims and how that worked, similar to the way it was downtown, except it was easier to, fly here because it's his actual like house with flies. These positions over here, box rail positions, we installed for the show because, as I said, sidelight was very important, and this was it on stage. Like the only places we had to put sidelight were in these zones, and I think there was something over here for Act 2. So this became like an in one sidelight position, and this and everything on stage. All of these things were on wheels. I'm going back to the overhead position. The sidelights, the booms, one was here on wheels, because if if a large, it was made so that one person could walk by. If several people had to walk by, our electrician, Manny Becker, our deck electrician, and also the house electrician, had to run over there, drag the boom out of the way, wait for them to run by, and put the boom back. Everything was that tight. So, okay, so this is the basic sidelight. There's really not that much. I will say that we started out with a lot more what I would consider like basic 45-degree high sidelight. And as we didn't use it, it all, like the rest of it was turned into specials, like to light one moment here or to light a piece of scenery or something like that. Added, a little bit of like, so the main sidelight system was like something like Lee 202 or R372, fairly pale and open with a blue sort of tint to it. And then there was a darker blue sidelight, like darker blue, not dark blue, but like Lee 161 or R67, just for, to add a little dimension. So the question about the sidelight when the trend change happened, yes. So yes, we were able to use the lights at different trims, just because we figured out once the trim went up where those lights would actually fall, and we were able to use them for other things and for other sidelights. But we also had a second set of pink sidelight. If Act 1 was like bluer and colder and blue tinted CTO, Act 2 had a more pink hue, I guess, to the sidelight, and there was a system of sidelight that was just hung for Act 2, there weren't as many of them because we didn't need quite as many. So here's where we are. So I started sort of figuring out the sidelight. You can see that there's two lights out here. Like, can you see where I'm mousing over now?
Yes, I can.
These two lights were part of the sidelight system at one point, but then became like musician downlights because we didn't use them in the show and we needed more light on the musician. So they're still the reason they just popped up here is because they're still in the system, which I think is very funny. So then we have some backlight. We added a little backlight here, and eventually some Fresnels are going to populate your screen in backlight. And they are, just again, similar, like open face 2K Fresnels with a sort of a dark blue gel that probably didn't turn off very much either. They set the whole tone for the thing, and we never really wanted to lose the feeling of light of like grid above them. So this is when we didn't actually need to have lights on up there, this sort of remained. Okay, scroller backlight was a huge part of this design. We used CXI scrollers. There again, there was not the LED ubiquity that we have right now. This probably would have been LEDs, and it probably would have looked very different if it was LEDs. The fact, that the CXI is kind of like gave the show a very particular look that I kind of enjoyed. I really like the CXI. I over the course of many shows using them, I figured out how they work and what they were all about. Okay, so scroll backlight. Then we added scroll sidelight, which again were booms that are not on this plate, but so booms through these doorways over here, like shooting through, booms in one, and these positions up here as well. and then out in the front. Okay. All right. So moving lights. Let's I'm gonna turn that on. So now there should be moving lights on the page. So part of the placement of the moving lights was dictated just by where I could fit them. Whereas I think my approach now would be to place the moving lights first and then fill in conventionals around them. This was a little different, partly because the audience saw so much of the grid that the layout of the backlight kind of had to be uniform or symmetrical, or not had, no, there's not, I wanted it to be symmetrical. So that sort of dictated some of where the moving lights could go. Yeah, these overhead lights were used for everything from boxes on the floor to, you know, to specials of someone standing on top of a ladder, to gobo washes, to just, you know, simple, you know, no gobo, just like open wide diagonal backlight, like especially the ones from up here. There were a lot of strobes. So I'll turn that on. There were, I think, 10 strobes from, because there were, you know, the storm sequence. There were a lot of different storm sequence or, you know, flashing, reasons to have flashing lights. So we sort of buried them kind of all over the place, you know, from all different angles and all different sides. The pre-show that I showed you a picture of, it's a single light, and let me see if I can, it's probably on a deck plate, but it was so New York Theater Workshop had a yeah, I'm gonna go, well, no, I can do it here. New York Theater Workshop had this metal halide light sitting around, like in their storage, and we stuck it on the floor over here and pointed it through the set and flipped the switch on, and that was our pre-show. That would, and that remained on Broadway. We actually bought that light from them, like a parking lot light. And I think on the road, and it remained that way for a long time. On the road, they finally said, we're not going to take this thing on tour. And we like used a source for par and found a color that matched the metal halide. So I suppose we could have done it in the first place, but there was nothing like the real thing still. Okay, so so here we are. Let's keep going. So the drops. So much of this show, so much of the lighting of the show was lighting the backdrops and the plastics and the Sykes. I just turned that layer on. There should be now a lot more light all over the place. This position over here, and all of this stuff upstage, all of these strip lights, and these strip lights over here built into the floor lit those plastics. This is where we used LEDs. So the only LEDs that were a part of the show were on the backgrounds and background surfaces. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit so we can see that. Hopefully my screen is keeping up with me a little bit.
Yeah.
But you can see how much, just like, you know, wattage, I guess not really wattage because LEDs aren't really wattage, but how much like power, I guess, there was in light that it took to light the plastics, and how and really how important they were. But that's also, I think, what made them look interesting and look good. Before someone asks, you'll see over here that we have 2 strip lights and 1 color blast. That was just because the size of the plastic. You know, we just needed to add another 12 inches, and that's what we used. All right, we can let's keep going. So the thing that just turned on are gobos. So we had these where my mouse is right now. These 70 degrees, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That we did the Act 1 sort of deck wash, deck lighting with templates, gobos that look like light through shipyard, ropes and equipment and almost like you shine a light through a fly floor on the theater. It was that sort of feel, and that did a lot of the texture for Act 1. And conversely, in Act 2, I'm turning those on right now. We had a lot of different kinds of foliage. It went from something that had a very industrial feel to something that most of them come from up here. They were diagonal backlights, and also on these positions over here were amber, mostly like shades of amber leaves or foliage through light through palm trees or something tropical, and also a greenish sort of light for when they're in the forest. I know that light in a forest isn't green, but this was a magical forest, so it could be whatever we wanted it to be. There was no research. Also, there were lights built into the deck. There's these every place you see these grates over here, there's a grating here, there's grating at the bottom of every post we had. So at the bottom of each post over here, we had light shooting up the posts, so to really give it a more architectural feel. That in Act 2 there completely goes away. So that was just another way to point out the contrast between Act 1 and Act 2. So every place there was a scenic post, there was a light in the floor shooting up that post. And smoke built into these grates all over the floor too. There was a lot of smoke in the show. Cool. The water, so the water ripples that I was talking about also all come from this area. So here's a couple of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, and they were like that. They're kind of all over the place, just lights pointed at the floor with a double gobo rotator with a split cut, an old-fashioned split cut of blue mixed into those. Okay, this is basically the light plot. I mean, this is how it all sort of came together. Of course, we did have a little bit of front light. We had 2 follow spots. And the follow spots and the follow spot operators, they were in business. Every time we did the show, they were in business the entire time. Also, a lot of the show was lit by follow spot. And especially, sadly, in the Broadway version, when the VL1000s would break every once in a while front of house, our spot ops were able to cover very, very well for our broken VL1000s. Roma, any questions so far, or anything else before we look further?
I'm looking through what we've got in right now. Do you have any particular method to position your moving lights, which do a lot of different things?
I don't know that I have a method that is overarching. I think my method changes for every show because the need is a little bit different. I do enjoy a good diagonal backlight, so I like being able to have light shoot over someone's shoulder, as a moving light, just to create that dimension. I will say that again, my work in dance, I've spent 25 years working with Jennifer Muller at the Works. I think I've been working with her since the mid 90s. No, I know I've been working with her since the mid 90s, but I think that's now 25 years. In fact, I'm speaking to her today about her next project, which I'm very excited about. Sadly, it's video. Crazy times we're living in right now.
No kidding.
So she is, everyone and Roman and I talked about this yesterday. Like, what is your workhorse angle? If you took everything away, and what do you need to light the show? Like, if you asked Jennifer Muller, it would be diagonal backlight. Like, that's when I do a show for her, I make sure I have diagonal area backlight first, and then add the booms. So I don't know, maybe because Partly because that's, her aesthetic. I've worked with her so long, it's possibly become a little bit of my aesthetic, but also it looks good. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's aesthetically driven necessarily. Anyway, to answer the question, no. I mean, space dictates so much. The set design dictates so much. So in this case, the moving lights are where they are because this is what this show allowed. And I knew that most of the specials were overhead, area pools or squares or triangles. And even like this light over here that I'm hovering above could point this way and be a great side light. So these two together could point this direction and be like a pipe band or a high side light. And these two pointing in this direction, not just could, they were. I mean, they were, they sort of worked together a lot. And these lights up here, in Act 1, they were above this weird transom rope wall and shot through scenery. They mostly shot through scenery and made crazy shadows of like windows and ropes and steel. Texture all over the place. That's to me, that's the success of so much scenery that I work with. The success is texture. This set, Danielle's like success is the amount of texture. And I think that's, I can say that about almost everything of hers that I've seen. And certainly every time I've worked with her, it's been that way. It's just so nice to light, you turn a light on and it looks good, as opposed to there's some sets where you turn the light on and you're like, oh my God, how am I going to hide that? This set, there was never that issue. Like anytime a light hit anything, we embraced it because it looked good. And so, isn't that nice? I mean,
It's
so basic.
it's always that play of, I think, light and dark. It's that makes it interesting, right? That there's dark there as well as the light.
Yes.
There are a couple of questions about your documentation or organization here.
Sure.
In your Vectorworks, do you always separate lights into systems
No,
via
I never.
class?
No, I never do. At 10 o'clock last night, I did that. 4 days. No, maybe I did not at 10 o'clock last night. That's an exaggeration. I over the course of the last several days, I kind of prepared this to be able to have this discussion.
For showing.
Yeah.
Sure.
So no, I never do that, ever. And I'll tell you why I don't do that, because here I'll give a plug to Lightright and John McKernan. I don't have to do that. I can go to Lightright and I can select whatever lights I want to Lightright and say like, okay, like select in Vectorworks and then pop over to Vectorworks and they're selected. So I don't need to have that kind of organization in Vectorworks because of, here's a big word, my workflow, which I've never said that before.
Okay, that's related to another question. How do you draw your lights for different positions that change heights? Do you copy and paste the position, then turn them off in different layers? Do the lights make duplicate copies in Lightright?
No. Yes, and no, they don't. It's still the light. So I don't duplicate the light if it has more than one position. I draw. Well, first of all, I draw in section that the position changes height. But if it's still one light and it requires one cable, and all of this that we see here is not for me. This is for the electrician. This is their tool. Like I make this so that they may hang these lights where I hope that they exist in the world. So anything that I can do to make it clear to them, I do. So no, it's the light's only drawn once, and in the section it shows what the trim is. But also you see this, you don't see something like this. Whoops, there. You never want to hear anyone say whoops, but you don't see this very often, like at the top of a light plot. But this was necessary to explain how it all worked, like so that anybody could, like, so you don't have to go to another piece of paper. You can go. You don't have to look at the line set schedule. It was very clear and very large at the top of this drawing that certain pipes had to move and what exactly their trims were from Act 1 to Act 2. Because there was so much, area, so much room for misinterpretation. We decided to be very clear up front. And I remember the day that somehow we like I don't know, miscalculated one of the trims or something like that after like focusing a bunch of lights. And of course that happens, but it's always like, it's crazy. That's when craziness ensues. But that is a good question. Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions?
Plot looks very inventive. Could we see some more result photographs at some
Yeah, I'll go back to
point?
the photographs. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. And there are even more photographs actually that I could pull up that are not in the PowerPoint if people like really want to see more stuff. I'm sure I can. There's still more. There's still more stuff to go on here. So
Cool.
so what I just put on, so I'm gonna turn everything off first. Boom. So now it should all go away. Nope, it all turned on. Because Vectorworks, ... Okay, now it all turned off. Did it all or almost all go away? It should almost all have gone away. I guess it didn't really all go away because why would it? Isn't that funny?
Yes, it did.
Okay, great. Not on my screen. Isn't that funny? All right, so we have
Almost all.
almost all, right. I wonder why. If anyone here knows how to use Vectorworks, I'm kidding. So we have these, what I just turned on were a bunch of lights that, yeah, so everything, that's boring. I'm gonna skip this. We're running long. Scenery lights. So there's a ton of light all over the place that is just for the set. And that's what these are. And in almost every occasion, they started their lives as something else and weren't used, so then they were pointed at a piece of scenery. Not so much these here because they lit the back of the transoms with scrollers, but so much of this stuff was pointed at the scenery to do a variety of things. The ones out here, all of these lights out here lit either that false proscenium that's here, the false proscenium, or the mermaid drop, or the header that flew in the middle of the show. I'll tell you a quick story about the header that flew in the middle of the show. I'm going to turn everything back on. So second week of previews, like did our first week of previews, everything's going okay. Obviously we see the show and we take notes and we make changes every day because that's how the process works. But Roger, one of the directors, for one particular moment of the show, wanted there to be like a foresty, like green, woodsy. Of course, it wasn't realistic. It was an abstract, like Danielle's abstract version of the forest canopy, and the only place scenically that it could fly was here. Can you see that hand, Roma? Where that hand is? Okay, so the only place it could fly was right here. As you can see, there are a lot of lights over here. So one solution that somebody threw out at a production meeting at like 11:30 after a preview was to cut this electric, which of course I thought that was a great idea. And I agreed to cut that electric and that was it. And it was never, no, we did not cut that electric because that's never, to a lighting designer, a good idea. What we did was, in order to make this work, we yoked this electric slightly up, all the lights, we yoked everything slightly upstage. This electric, we yoked everything slightly downstage, and we removed the shutters from the downstage side of this pipe and the upstage side of this pipe. So literally like took every light down, took the shutter out, put it all back up and refocused the lights. And in the morning, it was one of those things where it came up the night before. We knew we had to do it. We said to Brian, the electrician, like, this is what we have to do. Can we do this? And he said, if we do nothing else, like if nothing else gets done, yeah, we can do this. And if they give us a light. So that was it. And then they hung the header the next day. And then we made Roger's dream come true, which is really all we want to do. We're here to make dreams come true.
So that was the really only example where there was a space challenge and you overcame that. Were there any other instances where you would have had more, but you simply did not have the space?
Every other instance. Let me just put it that way. So every place that we don't Pretty much, like any place you don't see lights in these areas, it's because we couldn't hang a light there because there was something flying. I'm going to go back to just the set for a moment and show you. Well, actually, Roman, we started talking about this yesterday. So let me turn this off again here. So now we just see the lighting positions. So everything is broken up into little chunks. You can see that a little more clearly now, that everything has, you know what? Sorry, guys. I'm going to make this because I don't know why.
It says some suggestions where your drop class is activated, therefore showing
Yes, I'm
you have
seeing it
class
now.
selected.
I didn't think that would happen, but whoever said that, I have a feeling they're right. Thank you very much. We sort of got there at the same time, but whoever said that made me dive even harder into trying to fix it that way. So I appreciate that. It's always nice to have a little verification. So here we are. These are hanging positions all over the place. Nothing's connected. There's spaces all over. There's even this like ridiculous tiny little pipe here. That's because there was something in the way. Like if there isn't a pipe that runs across, it's because a piece of scenery had to fly. So these sidewalls, I'm drawing this here, boom, boom, and this sidewall here, this L-shaped sidewall, that flew out for the Broadway production. At New York Theater Workshop, it rolled away, so it wasn't an issue, but for Broadway and for the tours, it flew through the light plot to get out. So I had to leave space for it to get out. Maybe it didn't happen on the tour. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It did happen here. The tour, we can look at something else. I think we had more space on tour, so it didn't have to fly out. Maybe they rolled away. Same thing with this. So as we, I'm actually going to turn on the Act 2 set now. Act 2. So you see now, this is the Act 2 scenery, and I have, of course, an electric drone above the side flaps. So these were not, the side flaps were not there for Act 1, and the electric and the scenery itself were not there for Act 1. So this pipe and the scenery below it flew out, or was flown out for Act 1, and was flown in for Act 2. So as you see here, all of the electrics stop short of full stage to allow these pieces to fly in. Otherwise, everything would have been the same width as the first electric, like you see in a normal theater, like everything is this size or bigger. We could not do that. And this was our way of engineering, like engineering both in brain and in physically, how to actually get the lights, get enough lights hung in the show that we actually needed to do what we needed them to do.
Jeff, did you mention yesterday how long that act change was?
Well, the first time we did the act change at New York Theater Workshop, it was 45 minutes, which, as everyone knows, is not good. The first time we did the act change at New York Theater Workshop was 45 minutes, and then they, through a number of like re-engineering and rethinking, and I think hiring another person, got it down to 20 minutes. On Broadway, it was 15 or 20 minutes. And that is also because on Broadway, everything flew. There weren't, they didn't have people climbing ladders, letting things down, or untying things, or pushing things around. It was a pretty great system. And, the people that put that together there did an amazing job. So, yeah.
Can you show us, I now going from here, right? Can we go to your second touring plot?
Yeah. So
Where you tell me the essence is the same, but there's quite a bit of compression, it seems like.
Yeah. So let's, I'm going to take us back. I'm going to take us on a quick slideshow through post-Broadway. Here, let's start here. Share my screen.
I just have to hop in for a second. You've got about 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Yeah.
I can do so much in 10 minutes. We're going to look at some other things really quick. Okay, sounds great. Share. So here you have a section view. I think you should see the section of Broadway right now.
Yeah.
Okay. One sec. I know we have 10 minutes and here I am going slow. Okay. I have to move the there we go. Okay, so let's go back to that section. That's the tour section. So, okay, section of Broadway. Great. So we'll just continue down the road here. So this is the New World Stages equipment list. I'm not sure we looked at that earlier. Again, anyone can come back here at any time. It's New World Stages equipment list. Here's the New World Stages section. As you can see really quickly, we've lost any fly space that we had disappeared. It was a flat grid again. So we had to go back to rolling scenery and flying out and picking up the plastics instead of flying out the plastics. They were west coasted. Here it is. You can sort of see they're right over here. I think what we did in this case was we used a truss and motors. Instead of having someone climb up to the pipe to tie it up, we had the pipe come down to the people, which is, of course, what one would do if you thought about it. This is the sidelight plate, similar to Broadway. So, as packed as it could have been, basically. And, that's really all we could fit. But these lights did everything. I mean, it was, sidelight, moving lights, and some backlight, and a little bit of front light and follow spots. That was the recipe here. Here's our deck plate. Again, similar to Broadway, you can see how much light comes from the floor up to these drops. And, there was a deck in every instance, so we were able to have lights built into the floor. Here's the First National Tour equipment list. Here we are. Again, people can come back to that.
Yeah.
And the First National Tour
Very nice.
I'm not sure if I showed, I'm just going to pop them up really quick because I don't think I showed the Broadway magic sheets exactly. So let's see. So that if people want to come back, they can do that. They can look.
So Jeff, I've got a couple of questions here while you're doing this. I just want to be sure that they're addressed. From Joel Schulman. How many of the lights are part of the systems and how many are specials? Was budget a concern for the amount of dimmers needed? How long was the focus and how much of that focus were for specials? Was the time it took for the changeover thought about or concerned in the design process? Or was it something that came up in the technical process during
I'm going to answer these questions so fast. Sorry, were there more? Sorry.
No, let's stop there. Yeah.
Okay, can you give me the first one again?
Sure. How many of the lights are part of the systems and how many are specials?
Majority are
was
part
budget
of the
a concern?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was budget a concern with dimmers?
Yeah.
And how long was the focus for those?
Okay, so the budget was absolutely a concern. We made cuts to the show because we were over on dimmers. Absolutely, budget's always a concern, but it was definitely a concern. We had to make cuts for dimmers in particular. So that's an interesting question that I don't think people ask anymore because I don't know if anyone worries about dimmers anymore like that. The focus took 2 days. We had 2 days. Let me put it this way. We had 2 days to focus. There were so many moving parts and so much scenery and so many different trims. We didn't finish it in 2 days. We actually started teching Act 1 before we focused Act 2, which I've never done that. I mean, I've really never, not on Broadway. I've done that in summer stock, but it was not ideal. So that when we teched all through we teched in the entire, we teched Act 1 and then had to stop and come back in the next day and spent the morning and a little piece of the afternoon to focus all of the lights that were necessary for Act 2 scenery. And then we brought the cast back onto the stage. But I do remember there was this moment of we're not going to be ready to tech Act 2. Part of it was because some of the scenery for Act 2 wasn't even hanging. There was nothing to focus it on. I don't think the plastics were there. So, we couldn't, there was nothing to do. How much systems as opposed to specials? It was mostly systems. And then because there were moving lights for specials, a lot of the moving lights did a lot of the specials. So we didn't really need a lot of specials, but there were a fair amount of specials also. And some of them came from just the need. We in most cases we don't know that we need a special until we need a special. Sometimes ahead of time you can figure it out, but there were certain points where we're like, okay, well, we need a light there. Do we hang a light, or do we find something we're not using in the area and use that? And 50-50 mix. So now I'm going to fly down to the national tours. First national tour. So equipment list, first national tour.
Yeah.
Here we go. And then magic sheets, moving light magic sheet. As you can see, moving lights grew quite a bit for the tour. We can spend an hour talking about tour lighting as opposed to light, shows that sit down. The reason is because there's no time to focus. They're really, you sort of have to load it in, like fly it out, get the set in, and then be ready to do a show. So it's nice that somebody can sit in the back or on stage on a computer focusing all these lights, and everyone can keep doing what they're doing without like stopping the day. It's still an awful lot of VL1000s, and so we changed that for the next tour. Were you going to say something, Roma?
Yeah, for at least the second tour, does all of the scenery that was on Broadway go on tour with it?
Yep. For this show, okay. I mean, there wasn't really that much. So here's the first national tour light plot. What you'll see, just in brief, the biggest change is that there aren't these giant banks of PARs over here. We hung LED PARs top and bottom of the plastics over there to light them. There was something really nice about having all of that like firepower, like shooting into the back of the drops, that we sort of missed a little bit, but the LEDs top and bottom certainly made it bright enough so it wasn't a tragedy. All the side light, went into towers. Still, I have to say, like similar light plot, just in towers instead of on sticks, because they all had to move around the same way. Here's our deck drawing for the first tour. Very similar. Very similar. Okay, second national tour. Here's the equipment list. Again, I'll leave this up for a few seconds, and then everyone can come back and look later. I hope you do. Magic sheets. As we did this, the magic sheets got smaller and smaller also.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see, you look at front fill, that's 3 channels of light. That's probably 6 lights, because again, this tour, the difference between the first national tour and the second was load in time and jump time. Like I think the first tour sat down in cities for a good amount of time. The second tour did some one-nighters. So you really had to be able to get this in to a theater very quickly, get it out really quickly without hurting your crew. And as I like to say, and I know like if anyone's watching this who's worked on a tour of mine, maybe they don't believe me, but I always try to set people up to succeed, and I've gotten better at that. Like I think I did my first tour and I was probably not very good at it. And I sent something out that was really hard to do night in, night out. And I listened to feedback. And so, I think when you put a national tour together, it is so vitally important to not hurt the crew and make it not easy, because nothing's easy, but make it at least in the realm of possibility for them to give the audience the same show every night. There.
Jeff, I have to pop in here because I think this goes off automatically at the 90-minute mark, which is in like 2 minutes. So I'd like to thank you so much for doing this. I know you put a lot of work into it. And Roma, also, your input is always so valuable to these things. Thank you so much for doing this. Jeff, we'll have you back. You may have to finish this up. There's still a lot of questions that haven't been answered. Go ahead.
How do I answer the questions? If you can give people like a way to reach me, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And to everyone that's out there, thank you so much for joining us. It will be on demand. The same Zoom link should work, although I'm not quite sure exactly how that works. It will be online on Live Design Online. You can just go to www.livedesignonline.com, search Plot Lines with Jeff Kreuter, and if you were not registered, people can still register online. Thank you again, Jeff and Roma, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.